As I said, I'm Tony Lourakis. I'm the founder and CEO of Fleet Complete, a global software company headquartered here in Toronto with offices around the world, including US, Mexico, Australia, throughout Europe, including proudly an office in Athens, where we have about 30 staff. And on this panel, we're going to talk about collaboration of digital technology with my esteemed panelists. Allow me to introduce Mr. George Nounesis, Mr. Ian Spence, and Mr. John Psihos. Instead of myself giving an explanation, I'm going to allow each person, I'm going to ask each person to take about a minute to explain the organization that you're from.
Okay, should I start?
Yes, George, please start.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much for this incredible invitation. I really appreciate it. Delphi Economic Forum. It's nice in Delphi. It's almost as nice, or even better here.
Close.
I have to go closer. So, Demokritos is one of the largest public research centers of Greece, maybe the largest. It's located in Athens at Agia Paraskevi, and it's approximately 2,000 people who work there. So what is Demokritos is doing that may be of interest to a forum such as this? We are one of the first public institutions in Greece that we are transforming in the sense that we can finally produce prosperity, create wealth for the Greek society, and not only by carrying out research programs that are funded by our government or by the European Union, but by directly attracting private investments and indeed international private investments to the center for developing intellectual property in very interesting areas. The reason we've been able to do that the last few years and really seeing some interesting and fruitful results is the fact that we have been able to embrace right from the start some very disruptive, emerging, I would say, technologies. There is a lot of work done at Demokritos right now on AI, and we are, along with the Office of the Prime Minister and the Ministry of the Digital Health, we will be able, in a couple of weeks, to publish the national strategy on AI, which the last draft I read was in English. Just to be on the safe side.
Or I can very quickly translate to English in about a second.
And also we are doing a lot of work on autonomy for digital manufacturing. This is attracting quite a lot of international interest from private investors. And lately, we've been taking very firm steps in what is coming up as the major disruption within the next 10 to 15 years, and this is quantum computing and quantum technologies. So we're playing strong into that. We are actually the first public organization in Greece, research organization in Greece, that we opened up our campus to startups. And right now, more than 60 deep tech startups are thriving at Demokritos, collaborating with us, creating value and wealth alongside the public researchers.
Thank you, George. Ian, perhaps give us an overview of what Mars is. And for the Greek delegation in the room, this is not, we're not referring to the planet yet.
No, I didn't come in from the planet for today. So my name is Ian Spence. I'm a senior manager of partnerships at Mars Discovery District. Mars Discovery District actually stands for Medical and Related Sciences. We were founded in the early 2000s. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary next year. We are a self-mandated nonprofit and registered charity, and we are also North America's largest urban innovation hub. We're a 1.5 million square foot life sciences and climate research facility in downtown Toronto. You'll find us right by Queen's Park on the corner. And our work spans across how do we take science and turn it into commercial viability. This is always a contested issue, moving out of the research institutions and into the private practice. So look at Mars as being a public-private organization. We are funded in part by the Government of Ontario and the Government of Canada. We're also self-funded through different means and services for our fee-for-service work, international programs, etc. The really important piece that we wanted to look at is looking at how, when you look at a startup, what is the economic value? In Canada, we've recognized that challenge for quite a long time. And right now, Mars supports just over 1,200 companies in Canada. across life sciences, climate technology, and all your fun stuff in AI, quantum, et ceteras. And the work that we do helps move the needle because the work that our companies get into is typically politically or policy driven. There are very difficult steps to go into climate. There's very difficult ways to get into life sciences. If you're a biotech company and you're looking at clinical trials, that is not the same as a company that's doing a SaaS model, so software as a service, and doing a runway of 6 months versus 10 years. It's a very different business. So we're here to help add some flavor today, and I'm open to questions as well.
Awesome. Mr. John Psihos.
Good afternoon, everyone. John Psihos. I am a co-founder and CEO of Axilogic. Axilogic is a Canadian or Ontario-based company. It was formed in 2017 as a result of a joint venture that we did with MPAC, which is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation of Ontario that reports into the Ministry of Finance, that does all the property valuations for Ontario. As a result of this joint venture, we were empowered to go talk to foreign governments who are interested in copying or doing something similar to what we do in Ontario as it relates to doing property valuations and assessments. And one of our functions was to look at the existing environments in these foreign countries and get them to a point where they could execute and start producing property valuations that would comply with, say, IAAO, which is an international standard for property valuations, to help assist these countries in forming, revenue generating streams, providing tax equity, etc. So one of the roles that Axilogic plays is assessing the viability of MPAC's solution around the world and getting it to a point where we can execute that solution. As you may know, MPAC is one of the largest mass appraisal jurisdictions in the world. We don't have a lot of countries that appraise on this level. In the States, for example, it's typically done by county or by city. It's not done by state. Whereas in Ontario, again, and one other country in Europe, they are the largest mass appraisal jurisdictions. So we help these countries and we help these governments assess where they're at and execute on that vision.
John, just to expand on your point the other day when we were speaking, I thought it was quite fascinating, the Greek collaboration opportunity here with what you're doing and with MPAC in particular. As many of you know, Greece is working to stand up a property tax regime, and their two choices are build versus buy. And maybe expand on the asset and the IP that MPAC has and the benefit that could be, for example, for a country like, let's use Greece as the example here, that is trying to stand up this sort of regime. This is a great example of digital collaboration opportunity.
Yes, so my background's in software. I've grown up in the software industry since the 90s. I've been around for a while. And I have to say, when I first came across the platform that MPAC offered, I was very impressed by what they were able to do. They were actually able to build a platform and a tool specifically for assessment people or for valuers. In recognizing the capabilities of this platform, it became to me very clear that this is something that's very powerful. It's very rare where you'll find something that's as disruptive as MPAC developed. So what they're offering is it's a service. So when we go to foreign countries now, we talk to the governments. One of the first things, we don't have any money. We have to reallocate budgets. We have to get legislation passed to execute. The MPAC platform makes it very simple. It's a service that is offered. There's no capital expenditure required by any of these governments. It's a turnkey offering. You just need to be able to provide the information and the data and make sure that your legislation is aligned with how this platform executes, which in Commonwealth countries is not a problem. But in other countries, we also help them with legislation as well as to comply or to configure it in a way that makes sense. So the build versus buy becomes a very powerful proposition for countries who want to adopt this regime but are unable to afford it, especially when you get into third world countries that are trying to not maybe mimic what Ontario does, but get it to a certain point where they have some sort of legitimacy within their property valuers. So the proposition becomes very strong as to the the buy versus use that MPAC provides.
I thought it was fascinating. MPAC's probably spent hundreds of millions, if not more, over decades to build the platform. And while none of us here love getting our property tax billed, and I'm sure no one in Greece will, bringing that there versus building is quite a digital collaboration opportunity between the two states. Let's move into more of the scientific and research realm. Perhaps first question to Ian. Ian, over the decades here, the Canadian government at all levels, provincial and federal, et cetera, have come up with various stimulation programs, to support tech startups and areas of innovation in areas of strategic importance, like SHRED and IRAP and accelerators and whatnot. Perhaps for the Greek audience in the room, could you maybe just give a very 101 to 5-minute primer on maybe what some of the top examples have been, what we've done right, and perhaps what would be the one that you think has been the most impactful recently, and could this be a program that perhaps the Greek state could consider emulating if successful, if such a thing exists?
Yeah, it's a big question because the Canadian government has been doing these programs for a long time, and it's built like a house, right? Like everything isn't built at once; it's sort of layered on layer after layer. So if you look at there's different levels. You have municipal levels of programs that we have. We have city and jurisdictional, regional, and then there's federal. And for us at Mars, a lot of the ventures that we support, they do rely a lot on the grant program. So if you look at IRAP, so NRC's IRAP program, the Industrial Research Assistance Program, it is doing that commercial support to take the hard tech and turn it into commercial work. It is a grant program, and it's predominantly applied to help companies afford the employees, right? So it's actually the people that matter. So they have a stickiness. In Canada, we always get sort of this big brother effect to the US, right? We are right next to the United States. We are the largest trading partner of the United States. A lot of our institutions have a lot of the graduates exit and go down to the States to work. So we have this sort of maybe similar challenges that we are seeing this grow. So the conditions at which the market needs to be built is the most important. So the conditions to keep that talent in Canada and around. So I think from a programmatic piece, it is looking at what are the strength qualities of a nation. So in Canada, we are very well known for our minerals industry, our forestry, so we're a resource economy. But if you dig in deeper, if you think of the piping of the internet, the stuff that's actually running the internet, it's all developed in Canada. It's all come from here. So it's this deep history of R&D, semiconductor. So we have a very large fabless semiconductor industry in Canada. We have a deep biotech industry that's a little bit shallower than our other industries. It's based out of Toronto, namely in Ottawa as well, and Vancouver. So the way the programs look at it is it's very agnostic, though. So it's not picking racehorses, you'd say, but it's making the conditions right for the right type of businesses to take advantage of that. And that whole program, I believe, and I'm not sure if it's in effect, but it's in review, of course. Everything always is. I think SHRED is also SHRED for sure. So the SHRED is another type of grant program. Is in review of does it work correctly? If SHRED's been running since the 1970s, and so if I was to pick one, it's very difficult. I don't think I can pick exactly one, but if you pick on what we focus on in life sciences and climate, we would certainly look at IRAP being a big one as part of that, and then SDTC, so Sustainable Development Technology Canada. It's being wrapped up into NRC, so Natural Research Council, to then manage the climate systems. So these are very capital-intensive companies. So we're looking at solving challenges in, let's say, cement off-gassing. So the cement industry is one of the little-known emitters that is next to the transportation industry. And there's a lot of technology companies working to fix how cement itself is produced, it cures, it's transported, it's recycled. There's a whole supply chain effect. And that's where that organization like SDTC comes in to support that footing, because there's not enough money. The capital requirements are so large that if you think of a startup, everybody thinks a startup in their garage, and you think of, oh, they're going to get a $500,000 check or $1 $1 million round, some of these companies need to go to the $10+ million early rounds to even have a chance at surviving in that competitive landscape. So I think it's a very nuanced question.
Could you quickly expand on the areas of AI and perhaps quantum? I know we have some very exciting things happening here in Toronto, for example, and the godfather of AI recently out of Toronto has won the Nobel Prize, which we're quite proud of. Perhaps get into some of this for the audience.
Yeah, so let's talk about quantum first. So I believe quantum is a shared
And then
passion.
I'm coming to you next.
Yeah, it's a shared
emphasis on
passion,
this.
so I'll be able to hand it over. So in Canada, there is a long history in the quantum field. I think you could trace it probably back to where the internet piping and like companies like Nortel and others, Bell, and those that have built that telecommunications platform. If you look at quantum, Canada has 46 quantum companies. It's huge in the world. We are investing tremendously into a category that really has no commercial viability, at least from the day-to-day usage. And AI has recently become very popular because of the work that's come out of down in the States when ChatGPT, so the general purpose transformer was the key piece to how the AI actually makes sense from the consumer. And if you look at in Canada, a lot of our accelerators actually focus on vertical AI. So vertical AI is actually the work to be done by AI, not the stuff that happens in on ChatGPT or other services that are creating large language models to do work. We're talking about explainable AI, things that are getting to work. So if it's in the built infrastructure, if it's in supply chains, making things more efficient. And so from accelerator side, a lot of the tools, so AI as a tool, is adopted across all of our accelerators. Out of the companies that we support, at least 80% have adopted AI as a tool, as a service. So it's making a difference. And in Toronto, we're very well known for the Vector Institute. This is where Jeffrey Hinton has led that initiative. And they work a lot to explain it. So for corporations, let's say, to adopt AI, it's a big challenge. If you're moving away from the days of your digitization is on Excel, if it's in file folders, if it's in documents, all of that messy data needs to be made sense. And so you have to clean it, you have to organize it. So Vector has done a great job at doing the adoption work, the cleaning, but also the training. So being able to translate the world of software engineering now into AI engineering, and that's one group. Another one would be a lot of the particular venture capital firms too. They get involved in AI as sort of an accelerant, and they also have advisory services built in. So from an AI piece, AI is, I would say it's probably Canada's maybe the birthplace of it to some degree based on research done out of our institutions. And it's slowly morphed its way up into being a global phenomenon. And if you dig down one step lower, we are still trying to figure out how that plays out. So Canada's made some early investments in the compute power. That's a big gateway to AI, is actually accessing compute. It's a large investment. I think Canada's about $2.8 billion that they've put ahead for the compute workload. It pales in comparison to other nations, but that's a different conversation.
And companies.
Yes, and many companies have put way more against it. But if you look at it from the efficiency side, so if I can just tie it to capital efficiency of venture, I think this is a really important conversation to have is Greece is looking at sort of how your economy is posturing and what you're looking at focusing on, especially from the deep tech side, is capital efficiency is the game changer. And AI is notorious for the destruction of costs because it's that innovation is going to depress the cost to do business. It'll depress the size of a company to small organizations. So things like where we thought software engineering was really important, you have a team of 20 software engineers, now you're probably going to move down to 5. And those 5 engineers will use tools as agents, they call them, to work with them to create code. And Google just actually discussed that recently, that I think it was about 25% of the code base is actually moved to AI scripted. So we are going to experience a dramatic pivot in how software is built, which has a knock-on effect to the rest of the economy and how software is adopted. So I think the digitization transformation is being aggressively pushed by what AI is doing. And in Canada, we have a lot of companies, and I like the idea of this build versus buy scenario, because it's something that you might be experiencing too, is a lot of organizations and nations too in the procurement models are challenged. So in if you're trying to also think through that, I think procurement is another discussion to understand, does as a nation, or how do you adopt technologies? Are you going to build it behind yourself, or are you going to adopt tools and technologies at the same time?
Excellent. Mr. Nounesis?
Yeah, we're in discussions with Vector already about possible future collaborations, but one thing that may change things very, very soon in Greece is that we expect a big announcement that Greece will be selected for one of the 8 AI factories of Europe. So this is a new concept. This is a concept that involves big corporations. It involves startups. It involves grants and also lots of funds. The AI factory of Greece will have 3 verticals, as you said it, and this is very important to already see the possibilities for collaboration there. It's going to be the vertical for the big environmental data and clean energy. It's going to be the vertical for the big medical data. And the last vertical will be culture and the Greek language, big data for the Greek language, with the goal to produce the first Greek large language model within the next couple of years. This is something very important, and we really hope so. It's going to be created with the co-funding by the European Union. This is going to be a 50-50 deal. And as I said, we expect the big announcements to come in early December. This AI factory, again, will be linked with a high-performance computer, which is already being installed at Lavrio. So we collaborate with the National Technical University of Athens on that sense, and so that a lot of applications will be done there. Now, the major interface for computing in the high-performance computer will be for simulations on quantum computing. So this is how the whole puzzle comes to close. These are interesting times, as you mentioned it, because traditionally in Greece we have not been good with innovation. We didn't know how to use our research results to create wealth. And as a matter of fact, I think the reason for that is because we didn't really care to have really competitive research results. So this has been changing. The moment that you mutate your DNA, the moment you set as a goal, as a public institution of Greece, to create wealth, you know that you have to become competitive at the world-class level. It means you have to be able to attract talent, like everybody mentioned. And attracting talent doesn't really mean get the Greek kids who go to Boston or to Toronto to come back home. It means to get the kids from India, from Mexico, from all over the world to get the opportunities and come to work to Greece. And now we've seen that. We've been seeing that because of government policies. There has been a number of local VCs for early and very early stage. For the first time in Greece, we see more funds than grants. And a lot of startups are taking advantage of that. And at the same time, they make the launch to the European VCs and the international VCs, such as the European Innovation Council, which is taking things at a very different level. So all the ecosystem adjusts to that. You know, accelerators and incubators now with Essence and very, very high ability to compete are created. And another collaboration right now with Canada that is going incredibly well. It is within NATO. It is the NATO Innovation Program for dual-use technologies. It's called the Diana. The big center for Diana in Canada is in Halifax. So Greece and Canada, we both share 2 accelerators for dual-use technologies, which will open up a corridor for startups, not just from Canada and Greece, but from all over the alliance, to move freely from one place to the other, and also access test centers in both countries.
Go ahead, John.
I would also say from kind of the business use case, AI is very exciting. Again, we have to tread carefully and understand how we use it. A lot of times we build a lot of solutions with no problems. So we need to be careful as to how we execute. But one of our strategic initiatives is that once we get the assessment done in Greece and we have digitized that repository of all the data, it's starting to look at AI and how can AI better help Greece make better and informed decisions using AI. So it's very exciting right now with AI and all the applications that you can use. But again, on the business use case side, it's just treading a little carefully to understand how we can use it properly.
Excellent. George, if you can maybe go into a little more on the startup scene in Greece right now, and how startups can access various funding, government programs, specifically for innovation, including AI, quantum, et cetera. Maybe share a little more on this.
This landscape, the startup landscape in Greece has changed dramatically the last 3-4 years. Now we are talking about close to 1,000 startups, and they have been, valuated at over 10 billion euros. Imagine that in 2015 that was zero. There was nothing. And that grows incredibly fast. I would say it grows exponentially. We're still lagging far behind, the rest of the European countries. We rank very low in innovation. But the big challenge is also for the Greek public organizations, especially the universities, the research centers. They seem to be more agile in that direction to actually do substantial IP transfer to private sector. So what we see now is we see startups being able to really raise their first rounds, as I said before, very early or early seed rounds, which was impossible a few years ago, and then get ready to move up and address European or international venture capital. At Demokritos alone, to give you an idea, and as I said before, we are a research center. We have about 500 startuppers in 60 startups. The last 4 years, they've raised more than 200 million euros in capital. Wow. And this is very early.
How does that compare, Ian, to us here at Mars?
It's like an embryo.
Bring the mic up. Yeah.
I'm trying to like pick my brain. There's a lot of numbers that float around. So if you think of these numbers, might not be completely dead on, but if you look from 2010 until around 2022, venture supported by Mars was around, I gotta say, it's about 16.5 billion since 2010, with a revenue return around 9 billion. So not only are we tracking at the raises, but we're tracking at the returns, and that's very important from a capital perspective, moving science. And that's very difficult. Sure. is moving the economic value.
However, when we convert that from Canadian to euro, we're actually pretty close.
Sure, no. But it's a 4-year period, though, and you're only. If I start talking returns within 4 years, I wouldn't be here.
And it's interesting because it's unfair to lump all the returns to one specific market. So that number is bringing all the ventures together. So you think of companies in the pharma space and the biotech and let's say in a drug category, so therapeutics, they're all still, a lot of them are still pre-revenue. They're going through these state like clinical trial part 2. They're really not there. So a lot of those numbers are probably aggregating around SaaS companies, right? So that's been sort of the runway, but everything's changing. Capital is no longer cheap. It's not free anymore. It used to be very cheap to get money. That's becoming harder. We're seeing a big pivot over to the deep tech category. A lot of venture firms want to become deep tech firms. They don't understand how to do it. So you're seeing a lot of frothiness and hype around it. AI is no different. It's everybody thinks that their next big investment, but we stick true here in Canada. And I think this is why we have a lot of similarities, is focus on the really hard stuff. So the things that make big differences, and the world of quantum being a shared one, a lot of our quantum ventures still stick to that mandate. They understand R&D, they understand spending, and they understand getting their product to market. And they focus on very specific problems. They're not trying to boil the ocean. They're trying to boil very small things like a supply part into the quantum field, or an outcome using software-inspired quantum work. So they're using AI and quantum science to make things make sense. So it is a very complicated conversation. We need a lot more than an hour today to unpack all the things that Mars is interested in.
A little too deep for this.
It is, for sure. But I think I'd like to pick on the things that we're both good at. I think quantum is a great shared inspiration.
So on this topic, when you collaborate on an area of advanced science, how do you manage IP? from a licensing, from a rights, from a sharing? How does that work?
Yeah, so this is where the structural piece of Mars is important. So Mars being a nonprofit, we don't take any equity interest in our companies. That's Mars Discovery District, okay? So we work to support companies, and this is where the government funding is important, is to give them the runway that they have the services they require when they need it. So it's very different than a lot of accelerators. We want to make the clear distinction from an incubator accelerator to what an innovation hub might look like. And so we don't have time-bound services, and we don't take equity. So how do we keep pressure on them? Well, that's because we have the right infrastructure to work with the ventures when they need it, and we also exit some that aren't as interested. So working in IP is actually something that it actually comes to us with IP done. So I can't speak much to all the IP world because Mars is a little bit downstream from that. So we're more where a company has an MVP, a minimum viable product, and they have some investment forming. The key point that we want to make is that government grants and government infrastructure is not as strong signal for commercial success as private capital. That generates a very different lens to whether there's a market for that product to fit. And you can always iterate on that. So as long as there's something happening in that early phase, that's where we get interested. At the early IP side, there's a lot of new things coming. So like safe rounds, for example. Those are becoming more popular to have industry and startups work on similar problems, or academic institutions to protect IP for individuals. So that's as much as I can get into, because our staging is less about forming a company like a venture studio and more about taking a company from, let's say, pre-revenue to 5 million in revenue, from 5 to 20, and then 20 to 100. That's where we exist in the market.
Yeah, we are a non-for-profit organization as well, but remember, we're an academic research center. So we do take equity in the startups that are created based on IP produced in the center. But as I said before, we don't handle issues and collaborations only with our spin-offs. We do that with basically an array, a wide range of Greek deep tech startups today. Those we support in getting investments, getting investors, but we never take equity in these kind of situations. Now, for a country that is still quite poor, we have to admit that as Greece, to be a public institution without your own endowment, without your own funds yet created, it's very difficult to create an IP portfolio. You have to be very selective, very, very competitive where you place your money at, as far as the IP produced in the center. But I think we have developed a very good mechanism, anywhere from invention disclosure all the way to licensing IP, with good advisors here in Canada and in Europe and in the United States, so that we take the steps fast. And of course, very often we make mistakes, but we move on.
That's innovation.
Yep.
George, we heard earlier in the prior session that, and from the Kathamerini article today, that there are 7 cities outside of Greece with over 100,000 people of Greek heritage. Is there any part of the, of the strategy to tap into that diaspora and try to get some innovation to come back into Greece and to make Greece the place to?
We see that already. We see startups moving to Greece from the United States, from Canada. There are not many, but there are such examples. I don't want to specifically mention the names of such companies, although I could. But if you are trying to become a competitive ecosystem, you have to think globally. I mean, you have. And it's not only the diaspora, it's you have to be successful around the globe. You cannot. It's always very helpful to collaborate with the diaspora, and we see that things are done easier, they're done faster. There is a better level of communication when you negotiate with the diaspora. It's always a lot of goodwill, and we, I think, take good advantage of that, us and the diaspora.
Well, I just want to say it's quite impressive. From what I recall of your institution, over 10 years ago, this was a very bureaucratic, sort of institution without the entrepreneurial startup support spirit it has today. So quite a transformation and something to be quite proud of.
He was almost in 2014, I think. Demokritos, as many other public institutions of Greece, were basically bankrupt. They saw their budgets, which was exclusively from the state at the time, being cut by 60%. That eliminated huge programs of fellowships, postdoctoral fellowships. It was like cutting your your veins.
Yeah.
So things are getting better, but hopefully the rest of the public research ecosystem has to follow up, and especially the universities, because this is the big places. This is where there are lots of researchers. There's a lot of work being done. We see a lot of reluctancy, a lot of conservatism in the Greek universities still, because they are managed there's a lot of red tape. Yeah. More red tape at the universities than at the research centers. So though both of these are public. Demokritos was actually inaugurated in early 60s as a center for nuclear research. And it's very interesting that you mentioned nuclear program in the previous panel. We talk a lot with Mr. Christidis about reviving the discussion for a nuclear program of Greece. And it's interesting to note that the research nuclear reactor of Greece has now been decommissioned. It went into extended shutdown in 2004, and we had spent fuel, which we had. Was spent nuclear waste, which we had to send back to the United States. That was quite a tough operation, but we also had fresh nuclear fuel, and this, which was very useful, we donated it to McMaster University here in Hamilton. Yes, and they loved it. Yes, so
Bravo.
They are using it.
Excellent, great. It's impressive to hear all the collaboration between Greece and Canada. Maybe John, getting out of the academic and scientific realm back to the commercial. What you shared earlier about the example of the impact technology going to Greece. What other similar situations are you aware of where Greece, Canada has maybe products or services or digital technology that can be licensed to Greece to help it accelerate in its strategic initiatives, or even vice versa, if you're aware of anything from the other side?
I'm not aware. The opportunities exist, definitely. I'm not very intimate with other groups and kind of other agencies where I'm aware of similar products, but as long as I guess the business need exists, there's always a solution out there that can better help. And I know Canada, for example, and I know Ontario's done a remarkable job of developing a lot of platforms. But in the same token, I see what Greece has done as well. Having transacted in Greece in the last couple of years, their exercise of digitizing that platform has been incredible. When you deal with gov.gr now, it's a whole other world than what it was 8 years ago. So I'd also say that Greece has a lot to offer that other countries can look at where they can benefit from some of that exercise, because it's quite impressive, actually, what they've done in the last few years and how easy it is to transact in Greece now versus 10 years ago whenever you're involved with real estate transactions or even updating your passport or whatever the case might be. So I think there's benefits that can, benefits that can be shared across the board between Greece and Canada. It's just understanding and knowing, what avenue you want to go down.
Maybe a business opportunity for someone in this room to exploit. I thought we only have a few minutes left, so I thought I'd ask the audience if there's any questions. I appreciate this discussion may not be as controversial as the last panel or interesting, but please, if there are any questions. Sorry, it's hard to see here. I see one over here. Yes, go ahead.
Ian, you said something that quantum computing has no viable at this juncture. But in the same breath, you said that you're going to start seeing AI creating its own. So you're basically telling me in the same breath, when you use quantum computing, AI will start writing its own code. Is that kind of the
No, I think it's completely fair, and I think it's right now. I think we would both agree that quantum is sort of if you're tracking quantum from an adoption level, there is no clear pathway for it, but there's a ton of outcomes that are waiting on the other side. Now you have a race. You now have the race of all time, which is, so computation is changing. We have quantum computing, which has a totally different model, and you've got the GPU focuses or the ASIC focused AI world. And they're going to compete for supremacy. Pardon?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, this is good for both of us. There will be a work together, but they don't speak the same language. So that's a very clear distinction, is understanding the guts of how a quantum computer works. If you look at the classical use, or AI, there's quantum-inspired software companies that do that, but you typically can't put AI language models directly on quantum machines right now. You need a translator.
Just because we're almost out of time, maybe there one very quick.
I'll think they're going to work in collaboration, to be honest with you, but is quantum computing what AI was 10 years ago? And if so, what's Ontario doing to invest in quantum computing or the diaspora? Because I think quantum computing is the future.
So I think you can open that question right to the quantum companies directly. I don't think Mars needs to comment on what's going to win.
Working in Mars, though, what's your thought?
So working for us, I think when we follow the companies we support, we are very excited about what quantum the opportunity is. But we also get into the same problem where there's a pace of perfection. So we try to, great is the enemy of good, okay? So in the quantum field, you have a lot of work being done to create the best quantum computers. And that's going to be at a race at odds with AI, right? And both will want to work together. But if you look at the success rate of quantum companies right now, we still have yet to see deep adoption from corporates using quantum to solve their problems. The number one use case that quantum solves right now is cybersecurity, so encryption, so cryptography, maybe speak a bit more. And we're still seeing a laggard effect in the adoption of quantum. So I think we have a deeper problem to solve is adoption, not quantum itself.
That's what they said about AI 10 years ago. Here we are.
George, anything to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think Canada is going really strong in quantum, and it's not only Ontario. I think British Columbia is also, Vancouver seem to be getting incredibly strong with quantum, and we do see the effects from that. I think you must agree. So there are many ways open and avenues for collaborations.
Amazing.
In these exciting fields, yeah.
Amazing.
One last thing, ethics. I think we talk AI so much, and maybe for the diaspora and for Greece, ethics is so important. The Greek strategy for AI puts a lot of attention on the human-centric character of these new technologies. And there are many initiatives that are going to take place. They have started already. Let me just mention one because it might be of interest to all of us. The Lyceum project, it's going to demonstrate how Aristotelian ethics are working to answer some of the very tough questions and the very tough challenges that AI is posing today, not from a nationalistic point of view, but from the ecumenical, character of the Aristotelian ethics. So that's something we didn't discuss. There's a lot of, there should be, communities and cultures should be collaborating very strongly on ethics for these disruptive technologies.
A topic for next year's panel. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming today. Thank you all for listening.